That is Zambia, that is Zimbabwe, and in the distance there is Mozambique. This is Caroline and Graeme and Nicholas, and we on the mighty Zambezi, and they're trying to teach me how to fish. I think they're going to need lots of luck, so wish them luck. But first, let me show you how we got here. Musvingo, a city at the heart of Zimbabwe's cultural tapestry, lies about 290 kilometers from Beitbridge and is home to the iconic Great Zimbabwe, which is a testament to the nation's rich history and architectural ingenuity. The well-known Lake Maturicamp, formerly known as Lake Kau, the heart of Musvingo, offers a serene escape for both locals and tourists. But I will not be visiting these iconic locations today. I will be going to the little-known national park of Mushandike. I'm not even sure there's going to be accommodation facilities still available for tourists there, but we'll find out when we get there. Mushandike lies in the heart of southeastern Zimbabwe, roughly 30 kilometers west of Musvingo. Mushandike National Park, covering over 3,000 hectares, offers an intimate wildlife experience in a setting of tranquility. The park may be small in size, but it boasts an array of wildlife, as well as fishing opportunities for the anglers. Mushandike has a special place in my heart. My grandfather, Brian O'Donoghue, seen here leading some donkeys, was a tourist officer there in the late 60s and early 70s. And while I'm not sure how much time I spent there, I have some memories of the place, believe it or not. Let me try and do it then and now of that picture. The staff were all very surprised to see a tourist visiting them. They hadn't seen tourists in a long time. After the check-in process, I headed for the campsite. I don't know what's going on, but it's 4:45 on a Friday afternoon, and I've set up camp already and I'm ready for the fire. There's ablutions facilities up there. There's water all around, there's taps all over, and this is my view. When I asked if I was allowed to swim, they all laughed at me and said there's hippos and crocodiles here, so I must be careful. But how stunning is this? Another park in Zimbabwe. It's truly spectacular. You guys need to come and visit this place. The fire was lit, a rum was poured, and a spot was chosen from where I could enjoy my first Zimbabwean sunset of this trip. After a very peaceful night's sleep, I was up early the next morning to watch the sunrise with a cup of coffee in hand. I could not have been older than 3 or 4 years old the last time I was here. One of my earliest memories of the Zimbabwean bush was here at Mushandike. I still have a clear memory of walking up what I think was a driveway with the house behind me on my left. The driveway was lined with trees on the right-hand side, and a two-spur track had devil thorns covering it. Now, if you're wondering why they're called devil thorns, I think it's because they bring out the devil in you and make you swear when you stand on them, sometimes even when you're 3 or 4 years old. I also remember the sound of the emerald-spotted wood doves and the wind through the trees. Those emerald-spotted wood doves still, to this day, calm me and make me think of my grandfather. I didn't recognize anything here, but everything had a strangely familiar feeling. Now, my grandmother was a keen fisherman at the time, so I think a lot of her time must have been spent on the shores of this dam. Mushandike is not well known for its wildlife and is probably better known for its amazing fishing. Common fish species in Mushandike Dam include green-head tilapia, Mozambique tilapia, black bass, and African sharp-toothed catfish. Now, Mushandike's function has always been in training staff and rangers for Zim parks, and I think that function still carries on today, with university students studying conservation spending much time here. So a quick drive around and meeting some of the students, it was time to leave and get to Harare, where I was meeting a few friends at Haka, which is near Cleveland Dam. A lot of the road between Masvingo and Harare is being worked on, with many detours. It will be nice once it's finished, but the south of Harare is to be avoided at all costs. Rather take a long detour to avoid the chaos as you enter Harare from the south. I was early for a change, so I decided to take a detour through Cleveland Dam and take a look. Cleveland Dam is a reservoir located about 12 kilometers from Harare CBD. The dam is leased to Muyu Camp, who manages it in collaboration with the city of Harare. As kids, my father would bring us here to climb the rocks and have picnics. There's one rock I would like to find, but it's going to be difficult. The granite rock has a ladder drilled into it, and I remember climbing it, only to realize when reaching the top how high it was, and with my fear of heights, I froze and had to be rescued. Unfortunately, with all the activities, let's just say, that I saw going on in the park, I decided not to park and get out of my vehicle and have a look around on foot, and left pretty shortly after arriving and headed for Haka, which is pretty much next door. Haka, although more expensive, is quieter and cleaner. They also offer a variety of activities like canoeing and horseback riding, and some really nice picnic sites with braai facilities, which we enjoyed. While all the kids rode bikes exploring the park, the adults did the usual thing, talking about trips, routes, and equipment that we use. All I can say is, I've learned that I've barely scratched the surface of all the amazing places to visit in Zimbabwe. Thank you to everyone that came through for the braai. It was great to make new friends and see some old friends again. It was time to head to Newlands, where I would be staying with Graeme and Carolina for a few nights before heading to Kanyemba. After spending a few days in Harare, it was time to head to Kanyemba, and I had managed to convince Graeme and Carolina to join me. Admittedly, it wasn't very difficult. All I needed to do was mention Zambezi and tiger fishing, and they were both game. We took the Mazoe Road out of Harare, and this took us past a house that I stayed at when I was very young. I used to know it as Monty's house. It is now a trucking yard, unfortunately. I've just left Harare and I've got an awesome cup of coffee in my hand. Thank you, Caroline. And I'm following Graeme and his Land Cruiser Bucky. And we are on our way to Kanyemba, which is the most northerly point of Zimbabwe, next to the Zambezi River. So it should be a really good trip. These two vehicles couldn't be any more different. We've got a fully kitted out Land Cruiser, awesome touring vehicle, and a Land Rover Defender. Two enemies of the off-road world. No, but we don't have that sort of thing here, hopefully. But I can tell you there's a lot of pressure if any of us get stuck. The first one is probably never going to live it down. We've got about 300 kilometers left to go, and so far it's absolutely spectacular scenery. Yo, that V8 sounds good. Though we had only done around 100 kilometers, we decided to top up the tanks with fuel, as this could be the last time we were able to get fuel until we get to Mukuti at the top of the Zambezi escarpment on the A1 after completing our trip through the Zambezi Valley. The fuel filler has a safety security flap that prevents theft of fuel and misfueling, and only opens with the correct shaped funnel or pump. So Land Rover provide this little plastic funnel to open the flap when filling up using non-standard filler nozzles, something you definitely need when traveling through Africa. So make sure you have one when traveling with modern vehicles. The tar soon got narrower in sections. The idea of this type of tar is when oncoming cars are approaching, you obviously slow down, put your two left wheels onto the dirt, they do the same and you pass each other. It may be obvious, but if you're used to driving on the right-hand side of the road, it can be a bit confusing and dangerous. We were making good time, so Graeme found this awesome picnic spot at the top of the Zambezi escarpment with an amazing view of the Zambezi Valley below us, where we decided to stop and have breakfast, as well as some more of Carolina's amazing coffee. I think I'm being converted from my instant coffee. I tried to work out the last time I was on this road and figured it must have been between 1986 and 1987, where I was traveling with my grandparents in a 5-ton truck to Kanyemba, where we had to pick up my late uncle and aunt and a few of their friends. They had just spent a few days traveling from Manapools to Kanyemba in canoes. There are lots of upgrades to the roads with detours like this one in the area, so I can't help but wonder what plans there are for the area in the future. We eventually arrived at Mushandike Pools and decided to take a look around, as I'd heard the name often and wondered why. Hello.
That was the airstrip
Where?
that we just went over.
Oh wow.
The river's here. You'll find the old low-level bridge.
Okay, cool. cross the river, you have to go back through the township and join the main track and cross using the bigger bridge just after the confluence of the Hunyani and Panhami rivers. The river must be spectacular when in flood. The further we travelled, the more the tracks closed in around us and the rougher the track got, slowing us down, but when driving through such spectacular bush, it's better to take it slow anyway. We came across many small children walking long distances between their school and their homes, so we obviously had to stop and hand out soccer balls. Their reactions are always priceless, and it shows that a simple soccer ball can make a child's day, a concept we may never fully understand. Okay. There are some huge rivers in this area. About 800 meters after crossing the Angwa River, you turn right and head northwards on a very small track. This is probably one of the most spectacular tracks so far. One of the nice things about relaxed traveling without deadlines and trying to cover too much mileage is that you can stop often to stretch the legs and enjoy the scenery. Although the Mopani flies were in full force, as you can hear. There in the distance is Zimbabwe's most northerly point at Kanyemba, and across the Zambezi is Zambia. We eventually found a turn-off to Maturi Camp that was clearly marked for us. The driveway eventually opened up to a small floodplain after a short trip through some very dense bush. This was a nice surprise, absolutely awesome. Maturi Lodge is on the banks of the Zambezi River and offers camping as well as thatched chalets. Each chalet is set away from the other and offers riverside views and total privacy. There's also a dining facility and really friendly staff. The perfect spot to spend hours looking over the Zambezi or fishing from the banks. What an awesome surprise. I would never have found this place if it wasn't for Graeme and his local, on-the-ground knowledge and relationships. Now that is an Alouette Mark III helicopter, which a French company, Sud Aviation, started building in 1959 originally. How I would love to be in that helicopter now with these clear skies. Must be totally amazing. It was also good to know that the Zimbabwean army were in the area doing patrols and protecting the borders. After a long day driving, it was early to bed. The next morning we were up and drinking our first cup of coffee on the banks of the Zambezi. Is there a better place to enjoy the first cup of coffee? If you've traveled anywhere in southern Africa, you would have seen these in many places.
The little larvae and grub stage of the antlion that you see flopping around. It's like a damselfly. Using it. Yes. So he uses these mandibles. He's got these quite fierce mandibles, and he sits in ambush. So yeah, as kids you often used to pick up ants and drop ants on the side there. But yeah, that's him.
Today we plan to spend the day on the river. I can't wait. Graeme and Nicholas did a few checks, and the Defender was called for duty to launch the boat. Right now, I'm on the Zambezi, and Caroline, Graeme, and Nicholas are trying to teach me how to catch a tigerfish. So if I don't catch anything, it's their fault. I have to blame someone if I don't catch fish. Graeme owns a company called 16 Degrees South that runs specialist expedition safaris in some of Zimbabwe's wildest and most remote destinations, bringing elements of both luxury and exploration to the traditional mobile safari experience. With that in mind, we stopped off at Muyu Camp to take a look around. Muyu Camp is an exclusive use photographic safari lodge for up to 12 guests in 6 rooms, all with views over the Zambezi. Jeff, who manages and built the camp, was kind enough to let us take a look around, as there were currently no guests that we would disturb. Now this may look like a sheltered lodge, but it's not. There are no fences, and Jeff was saying they often have elephants and buffalo, as well as other wild animals passing through the camp, something you'll be forgiven for thinking is impossible with the manicured gardens. so you have to be aware when walking around here. Now this is something I've never seen before. The wall is made out of coal and water runs down the coal and evaporates, and it actually turns the room into a cold room. No electricity or solar or anything is required. It's quite amazing. Wow, I wouldn't mind spending a couple of days here, or a couple of months would be good enough. What a spectacular place. Thank you very much, Jeff, for allowing us to look around.
Coleman. Yeah, the Lila Park, synonymous with the Zambezi Valley, and male and female trees. Males have the flowers, and the female have the fruit. So you get a different sexes and different trees. Whereas you get other trees that have flowers and fruit together. The Lila palm, female have fruit and the male has flowers, and the male will pollinate the female tree.
Nicholas reckoned he knew a very good fishing spot that he was going to take us upriver. Let's see if I'm lucky. It was good to see the Zimbabwean Army or Air Force patrolled the area, and they clearly checked up on what we were doing. What an amazing helicopter. Must be amazing to fly in the region. After a spectacular trip up the river through some amazing gorges, we eventually arrived at a sandbank where we were going to try and catch some fish. We were a long way from any civilization, and the hippos watched us, obviously wondering what we were doing there. Even a pair of African hawk eagles flew over us to investigate. We all chose our spots. I think Caroline had the advantage of being slightly further out than me, but we both chose the river. Graeme, on the other hand, snuck quietly off without saying anything to a little what could only be described as a pool next to the Zambezi. Maybe he knew something we didn't. I watched my competition closely for hints and tried to mimic what they did. Graeme soon caught 2 fish in succession, but I blame Nicholas. He had Nicholas on his side. It must have been it.
two in the back.
Carolina and I kept trying in the river with those hippos looking on in disgust. I then think Nicholas gave up on us, as he suggested that he would show us another spot further upriver. We didn't catch anything, although we did have a few small bites, much to the amusement of more hippo who came to check on us. The sun starting to drop, it was time to head back to Maturi. We were about 60 kilometers upstream and wanted to be off the river before nightfall. The campsite was surrounded by small game. A troop of baboons was also visiting, but they took no interest in us or our campsite. This place is so quiet, it was clear that they didn't associate campers with food yet. Often you would hear that you shouldn't camp in riverbeds and floodplains, and you should always make sure you camp on higher ground. Here is a perfect example of why that is great advice. Yesterday, the area in front of the campsite looked like this. Today, we had water 10 meters from our vehicles, and although not deep, the ground was extremely soft and slippery and would have been a big recovery exercise. The reason the water levels had risen so much was more than likely that more water had been let out at Kariba Dam wall, approximately 250 kilometers upstream from us. Or possibly there had been lots of rains in one of the catchment areas, which extends to around 10,000 square kilometers around us. With lots of fish in the floodplain catching bugs that had been trapped by the rising waters overnight, Graeme decided to teach me how to catch bream. I honestly didn't really take him seriously until this.
Youngster,
It's pretty fish, eh?
Diloticus, introduced from Egypt down the Nile. And they get to about, I don't know, 3.5, 4 kgs. Predatory fish, so, and also can push out our indigenous species of bream.
Okay.
We've got about, I don't know, there's probably about a dozen of indigenous bream. 3-spot, red breast, robustus.
Was that bream, eh?
Yeah.
Not being the type of person that likes to brag, I won't say who caught the biggest fish, but you be the judge of that. After fresh crumb bream for breakfast, Andy Lowe, the owner of Maturi, took us down the river while Nicholas looked on and wished us luck. Andy wanted to show us a few things, including the confluence of the Luangwa and Zambezi rivers, as well as an old slave trading post. Okay, we've made it to the most northern tip of Zimbabwe, which is right about there on that tree. There's a little white marker there. That's the Luangwa River, where you can see it's all brown. I hope you can hear me through this wind. And I still haven't caught a tigerfish, but I blame these guys in the back here that don't know what they're doing. They're obviously not teaching me correctly. But that's Mozambique, that's Zambia, and that's Zimbabwe. As we got off of the boat, we found some ruins. After some investigations and reading the traditional Zambia blog page, I found out that the Portuguese had vast estates known as prazos, and they used slaves and ex-slaves as security guards and hunters in the area. They trained these men in military tactics and gave them guns. These men became expert elephant hunters and were known as Chikunda. Although these men were from different ethnic groups from the interior of Africa, they developed their own language and culture. At the beginning of the 1800s, the Portuguese estates began to crumble due to drought and diseases such as smallpox. Many Chikunda then deserted the estates and formed armed bands seeking any means to survive. Groups of Chikunda fled up the Zambezi River. One of the groups, under Chikwasha, made landfall around the Luangwa confluence. Here, he and his men became very useful to the chief of the Nasenga as protection and provider of food and elephant tusks. Okay, so we've done a bit of walking through the bush here. The corner of Zimbabwe is over there, the most northern point. But there's some ruins here that's meant to be linked to the slave traders. Another group under the warlord Kanyemba traded slaves up and down the Zambezi River. It is suspected, and I have been unable to confirm that, this site was used by Kanyemba as a slave trading post. Kanyemba was the son of a Tande father and a mixed-race Goan mother from Goa in India, who had brought under his control a group of Chikunda. They had several camps along the river. The name Kanyemba, meaning the ferocious, was originally given to an island at the confluence of the Kafu and Zambezi rivers. The island was one of Kanyemba's camps. At his death in the 1890s, Kanyemba became the spirit of the Chikunda people, known as Mohondoro. I read on Wikipedia that after the scramble for Africa, both the British and Portuguese authorities launched a campaign to end the slave trade. The Chikunda were defeated but allowed to settle in villages in the Luangwa River valleys and preserve their Chikunda heritage today, although most have merged into their host communities. These longboats are very common in the area and are used as transport and for fishing on both sides of the river. Just a quick thank you to Andy for allowing us to stay on his property and for catching some bream. I caught some fish at least. And we had them for breakfast half an hour after I caught them. I then had a crazy idea. Let's try drive up to the most northerly tip of Zimbabwe, to where we had just been. Graeme and Carolina were keen, but they did look at me a bit suspiciously, like they expected something to go wrong, like it does most of the time. The border officials did seem a little concerned at how we were going to get these two massive 4x4s across the river, but after assuring them that we weren't going to do that, they let us through. Right now we're at the most northerly point of Zimbabwe. You cannot go further than this by road or by car. The next option is to cross the Zambezi River to Zambia in a little ferry or a little canoe. From here what you can do is you can go up to Mana Pools, Kariba, Matusodona, Vic Falls, into Botswana and back to Johannesburg or South Africa. What an awesome trip it could be. Thank you to the border customs officials for allowing us to take a quick drive down to the edge of the Zambezi. I've I've probably mentioned this a few times before, but one of the best things to do in these areas is take your time and stop often for a cup of coffee or cool drink. Just look at this bush. I absolutely love it, except for those darn mapani flies. After just over 100 kilometers of dirt tracks, some good, some bad, we arrived at the Mukanga entrance gate into Chiwari, where we checked in at the Zim Park's offices. A few kilometers down the main track, we turned off onto a track that clearly doesn't get used much. What a privilege to be allowed to visit this concession area that is not usually open to the general public. Another benefit of using local guides with local knowledge and local contacts. What a monster. This drive was really awesome, but I must admit I was a little bit worried that we weren't on the correct track as it hadn't been used very much. I don't know how Graham saw the snake, but he saw it lying on the track. It had just been fighting with a cobra. Unfortunately, I didn't get it on film, but Graham moved it off the track so we didn't squash it. The trek was quite rough in places, requiring a little bit more concentration, but the bush was thick and you could clearly see it was green season. Absolutely beautiful. After an amazing drive, we eventually arrived at the campsite. Well, not really a campsite, more of a lodge of a private concession that we were allowed to stay at for the evening. What a special place. After quickly setting up camp and pouring a few beverages, and then taking out some food from the fridges, we started the fire, and I spoke to Graham about his company 16 Degrees South. Graham, what is it that you do?
We provide special interest safaris for people looking to explore niche interests in Zimbabwe. So photographic safaris, walking safaris, active safaris, so more adventure based. So.
And you've got a concession, haven't you? Where you've got a private camp that you set up, right?
Yeah, so we've got access to several private concessions within the Mana pools and I guess the greater Zambezi area. So we've partnered with people who have access to concessions that we feel fit the product that we're trying to sell.
So what would you say is the biggest advantage to having a professional guide such as yourself? I mean, because like a guy like me, I get in my car, I drive around and I see all these wonderful places, that I visit and that. What would you say makes a difference of having a professional guide?
I think it's, like you were saying, today we went through some really beautiful scenery. We did some pretty gnarly crossings that you need to know what you're doing, but you get to places like this where the access is granted through relationships, through a network, through growing up in Zimbabwe, and also understanding what your clients are looking for and what sort of experience they're after.
But you know what, even a simple thing, I mean, everybody knows that I can't catch fish and I don't know anything about fishing. But today I stood in that little floodplain with you,
Yeah.
and we were catching that bream.
Yeah.
You know, and I probably wouldn't have known how to do that if you weren't around to show me. And probably a lot of people are going to laugh about that on the channel, but it was actually great fun. And then to eat those bream, what, half an hour later?
Half an hour later,
45
you're eating fish that you've caught. And you know, the fish were swirling this morning when we woke up.
Yeah,
we
I must just add
coffee.
that I caught the biggest one. Eh?
You caught the biggest bream, and happy you did catch something.
So Carolina, tell us about your drive today.
I've had a mouthful, Bruce.
No, I'll wait for that.
It's true, eh?
No, I'm joking.
Production manager.
It's like the waitress that comes to you in the restaurant and says, how's your food, as you put it, you know?
I know. Bruce, it was good. It was nice to be able to get behind the wheel. Exciting, a little bit scary in some moments, but I had a good instructor, and yeah, it was fun.
It was quite hectic, some of those climbs and drop-offs and ditches and stuff, eh? You needed to know where your wheels were. Eh?
Thanks. The vehicle was also a really good vehicle.
Oh, that's the bad one. So on this trip to Kanyemba, because you hadn't been to Kanyemba before, what was the most surprising thing for you? And what do you think would be sort of the highlight reel for the trip?
No, I made that joke, but some of those vistas or sceneries, you expect to see a pterodactyl flying out through the gorge. You know, it's got that feeling, and certainly being in the green season, you know, all the trees are green. There's, you know, water's been flowing down those ravines and the gorges. You know, it just feels very tropical, and almost like Hawaii in a way.
We spoke well into the night and even hatched a few plans for the future. More on that later. You can always tell a lot about a person's passion when they describe something to you. And I can see that Graeme has a passion for Zimbabwe, and it is undeniable. We were up early the next morning. We had a long drive and wanted to find the dinosaur footprints. Before we left, we hired one of the local guides from the lodge to show us the way. The track was very overgrown, and in all honesty, if it wasn't for the guide, we would probably have turned back. The sunrise was spectacular, as it always is in southern Africa when you're in the Zambezi Valley. There is nothing better than driving through overgrown tracks with brown grass being highlighted in orange by the rising sun and contrasted against a dark green bush. The overgrown track eventually opened up and revealed an almost dry riverbed. The heat was rising, and the bush was noisy with bird life and the baboons shouting in the distance, warning others of our arrival. The dinosaur tracks had been filled with sand and weren't obvious. Honestly, if I had been driving past here, I would probably have missed them. The site was discovered in 1984, with another 7 sites of footprints and fossils in the area. The footprints are thought to be formed from dinosaurs walking through mud that over time hardened and were filled with sand and small pebbles and mud. The footprints were preserved for millions of years until erosion brought them to the surface again. The footprints are believed to belong to an Allosaurus. An Allosaurus is a large theropod dinosaur that lived about 145 to 150 million years ago. It was a predator that averaged about 8.5 meters in length, with the biggest specimen found being 12 meters long and 5 meters tall. That's about as long as 2 average 4x4s. As the most abundant large predator of the Morrison Formation, Allosaurus was at the top of the food chain and probably preyed on contemporaneous large herbivore dinosaurs, with the possibility of hunting other predators, and potential prey included ornithopods, stegosaurids, and sauropods. Some paleontologists believe Allosaurus hunted in packs, much like wild dogs and lions do today. Scary to think of a pack of 12-meter long and 5-meter tall predators with large teeth running around the countryside. If you visit these places, please respect them and use local guides to guide you to find them. We found out after our visit that some 4x4 drivers filming for TV tried to find these footprints and never did. The crazy thing is that in the video it is clear that they were unknowingly driving all over the footprints as they were covered in sand at the time. They even got stuck in the riverbed just above the footprints. We are so fortunate that these places exist and that we can visit them, and we have a massive responsibility to look after them. So please stay on existing tracks. With the baboons still shouting at us in the background, we decided to have a quick bite to eat before taking the track to Mana Pools. Just before joining the main track to Mana Pools, we stopped to make sure the radiators had not been covered in too many seas. It's always a good idea to do this after driving these sorts of tracks. This route cannot always be driven, especially in the rainy season, as some of the bridges have been damaged. Also, carry something to help clear the trees that elephants push over when needed. We had Graeme. The closer you get to Mana Pools, the more the track opens up. We didn't see much game as the bush was thick, but still an amazing route. I was loving every second of it. It was also really good to see the baobabs full of leaves. We soon arrived at the Nyakasikana gate and only had about 30 kilometers left before reaching the tar road. It's always very sad to leave these places. Chumutsi Gate marks the end of the adventure through the Zambezi Valley. All that was left was to climb the escarpment out of the valley. The roads have deteriorated during the rainy season and there are some crazy drivers, so this road has to be driven carefully. So please take your time when traveling here. Work on an average speed of about 80 kilometers an hour on a good day. We said our goodbyes in Chinoy as I was turning south towards Chigutu and Gweru, and Graeme and Carolina were heading southeast to Harare. A massive thank you to Carolina and Graeme for joining me on this trip, and to everyone we met along the way for all contributing and making it such a brilliant trip. And last but not least, thank you for your continued support and comments on this channel. I love hearing from you, and I do try and reply to everybody.
You're giving me wind and rain.